Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
It's our sports unit, and today we're going to focus on a type of sport that's not that famous. It's not something that is a team sport, and unless... Well, this is my opinion, of course. Unless you have money, you're probably not going to be learning how to fence. It's something that royalty would often engage in long ago in history. And you'd have to find a special fencing teacher. That's not easy. A fencing outfit. We probably should call it a uniform. If it's for sports, it's not an outfit, it's a uniform. And then you have to get one of those cool fencing swords with the special tip that protects the blade so you actually don't stab someone.
Right.
So what is fencing? I had a pretty good definition here. It's a sport where two people are competing against each other. They're in protective uniforms, and they have something called a sword that, again, has a little protective end on, or tip on the very end of the knife. You could say it's a sword, so it's kind of like a knife-like object. But they try to hit each other, and you get different points based on parts of the body that you're able to touch. You're trying to defend yourself, so you have to move quickly to block some of those moves by your opponent. But it's kind of a cool sport. You have to be in good shape. I've never seen someone who's very heavy fence, and you have to be able to move quickly. It's a very graceful sport, I think.
Well, I actually took fencing in university. They did offer it as a PE class. I was, interested in something other than the usual jogging or basketball or stuff like that.
Oh, that's
so I
fun.
thought fencing might be cool because they actually have the equipment and the swords and stuff like that.
You don't have to buy it, right?
No, they had it. You just used it during the class time.
How was it, Tom?
It was interesting. I was not very good at it, but it was an interesting diversion, I suppose, from regular university curriculum to meet together at the field house and play around with those swords for an hour.
I would guess
once or twice a week.
Yeah, I would guess if you're a dancer, you might be better at this.
Could be.
It's very quick and very graceful. So I always thought, wow, that would be hard to learn. Oh, it's so cool that you took it.
Yeah, I don't really remember it too well, but all I remember is I wasn't very good at it. But in any case here, it's all about sword play. And, of course, fencing involves swords, and you try to fight your opponent. And, of course, as you said, they have the safety tip on the foils to prevent people from getting stabbed. Although accidents do happen sometimes.
Yes.
But for the most part, it is a safe sport. And we'll talk about it in today's program. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of our article, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
En garde! You hear the referee say as your opponent points a thin sword in your direction. You ready yourself similarly, and the bout begins. Moving back and forth, you block your opponent's blade and thrust your own toward them. The moment they hesitate, you stab your blade into their chest. A buzzer goes off. You've won the point. All this exciting sword play is part of the combat sport of fencing. Modern fencing has its roots in European styles of sword fighting. As war moved from sword-based combat to guns over time, sword play evolved to become a sport. It's difficult to say where exactly fencing was born. However, Italian and French masters had particular influence in developing its rules and practices. Rather than for waging war, fencing shifted to promote fitness and good sportsmanship. These are still crucial to the sport today. In a fencing match, competitors strive to win points by touching a targeted area of their opponent's body armor with their blade. There are 3 blades used in fencing: foil, saber, and épée. Varying in their construction and rules of play, these 3 weapons also suit different styles and targets. The shorter foil and longer épée require thrusting or stabbing with the blade. Meanwhile, the saber is best for cutting and slashing. By no means is fencing as simple as it seems. It's highly athletic and requires strategy, technique, and quick reaction times. It's a fantastic sport for keeping yourself in great shape, both mentally and physically.
Okay, let's talk about the contents of our lesson for today. Fencing is a kind of sword play or sword fighting where you take swords and you battle an opponent, and there are different kinds of sword fighting all over the world. Of course, there is a sword fighting in ancient China, in Japan with the ninja warriors, and of course in different cultures they all have different ways to fight other people, holding up those sticks or pieces of metal, and we're talking specifically, I guess, about the European variety here of fencing, and of course, it's a sport these days. And in this particular sport, when you begin, you say en garde, which is French for get ready or be on your guard, get ready to defend yourself, and that's what you will hear the referee say as your opponent points a thin sword in your direction. Now, of course, if you are involved in a fencing match, it's one against another person. And of course, you have a referee who is making sure you're fighting correctly and there are no fouls and things like that. Of course, lots of sports have a referee there to sort of monitor things.
Yeah, they're in charge of keeping everybody obeying the rules. You have to be a good sportsman. You have to have good sportsmanship, be fair, play by the rules. Don't try to cheat. Lots of sports have a ref, as we sometimes shorten it to, a ref, who will say, oh, no, you committed a foul, and this is your punishment. So you hear a referee actually say those words, en garde. Be ready, we're going to start, because you need to protect yourself. An opponent is someone that you're facing and you're going opposite against in some way. Maybe you're in a competition, maybe you have an opponent if you're in a debate and you're arguing some sort of topic, you're debating a topic, that's your opponent. So it's someone you're competing against. Now, this is what they say as your opponent. It says, points a thin sword in your direction. And Tom knows more about that. I'll let him talk about the types of swords in a minute. So what you need to do, it says, is you ready yourself similarly. Notice here we're using ready as a verb, which we don't usually do, but you will see it. So, you need to ready yourself for whatever happens. So just, kind of prepare yourself. And the bout begins. We often use the word bout to talk about a match in a particular type of sport. The one you'll hear most frequently where this is used is boxing. They have bouts. They don't have boxing games. Sometimes we'll say matches, a boxing match, but we'll also use the word bout. We use it to also talk about a period or session of something, like I had a bout of flu or a bout of cold last week. But here it's a contest. Usually it's a contest of strength. For boxing, and here we're using it, of course, in fencing.
I did want to mention in passing here that the word match and game and race are all used in different situations. I've heard people talk about races, like a marathon, and they call it a game, and that's not a game. A game involves teams and a ball and things like that, so you would not use the word race. You would not use the word game if you're talking about the marathon or the 10,000-kilometer race or something like that. That would be a race. And a game, of course, is a basketball game. And then, of course, you have a soccer match or a fencing match, or you have a basketball game. You might hear people in England say a basketball match. That's acceptable as well. So, again, you ready yourself, and the bout begins. Moving back and forth, you block your opponent's blade and thrust your own toward them. So, of course, if you have a sword, it will have a blade, the piece of metal that sticks out. And And the moment they hesitate, you stab your blade into their chest. Okay, so to stab means to take a piece of metal and to shove it forward into something else. So this happens sometimes if somebody's trying to kill somebody. Unfortunately, I have to use that example, but you might stab them with a knife in order to kill them, say if you're a soldier in war or something like that. Or you might have a bayonet on the end of your rifle and you try to stab your enemy, if you're in a battle.
Yeah, if you're a seamstress or you like to sew, sometimes a needle will stab into your finger. Ow. It happens. So be careful. And we definitely don't want to go around stabbing people with things. You can hurt someone if it's sharp. So the moment your opponent hesitates or, shows that they're not sure of which way to move, that's when you stab your blade into their chest. And then a buzzer goes off, and that means something's happened in a game. When you hear that buzzer, if something goes off, it just means that sound is emitting. So you're hearing the sound, it goes off. In the morning, your alarm goes off, and that means it's time to get up. Or if you're baking something and you've set the timer so you don't overbake your cookies, when the time expires, that alarm will go off, and you know it's time to take them out of the oven. Well, here the buzzer goes off, and that means you've won the point. So I guess, Tom, I don't know about fencing. I guess if you hit your opponent right, that's when you get a point?
Yeah, I think it's electronic, of course. There are sensors in the chest of the opponent, of your competitors. So, of course, if the tip of the sword touches that area, then a buzzer will go off, and you've won the point, and you have to compete for a certain number of points in each match, just like you would in a badminton game or a volleyball game, etc. And all this exciting swordplay is part of the combat sport of fencing. So this is a combat sport, which means you're fighting an opponent as if you're trying to kill them. You're not really trying to kill them. And another combat sport would be, say, boxing or wrestling, things like that. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our explanation for today. Let's take a break right now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是9月26号 Unit 14 Fencing, where swordplay meets sport. 这是一篇扣漏字选择的练习题，内容和击剑 fencing 有关。不晓得听众朋友当中有多少人接触过这项运动？老师只在电影里看过。印象当中，从事击剑的人身手都非常的干净利落，矫健敏捷。好，我们现在一起来解题。请同学先看到第一题，前文提到 You ready yourself similarly and the bout begins。你也可以用同样的姿势预备，比赛开始。前后来回移动，你挡下对手的刀刃，并把自己的剑刺向对方。接着我们看题干本身的句子，空格 They hesitate. You stab your blade into their chest。意思是空格，他们犹豫，你就挥剑刺向他们的胸口。而下一句提到分鸣器响了，你得分了，可见题干这一句代表得分的动作。好，请看4个选项，这4个选项的意思分别是 A. Until 直到 B. The moment 是指一怎么样就怎么样 C 是 However 不论如何 D 是 Even though 即使。把4个选项都试着带入句子，只有 B the moment 语义通顺，表示对手一犹豫，你就挥剑刺向他们的胸口。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about fencing, a premier sport. Some sports, are pretty famous and you see everywhere, but fencing is a little bit more, I would say, unique and special. You don't often see it. Like Tom, it was a sport that was offered at my university, but I just thought, there's no way I could do it. It looks so hard. But we often will see scenes of men fencing in movies that are set back in time. Maybe in the 1600s or even 1700s, they were still fencing a lot as a form of fighting, actually trying to kill someone. But now it's turned into a sport, as we've discovered. You've got a referee who will watch the game as you play against your opponent. And the point is, you're supposed to block your opponent's moves, block his sword, while trying to thrust or stab your blade into their chest. You get points for, it sounds like, the core of your body. Maybe if you hit their foot or leg, you don't get any points. But you're going to have to move quickly and gracefully and always be alert. You could never start to daydream while you're fencing, because then you definitely lose.
Indeed. So we've introduced this topic to you. We've given you the basics. So let's talk a little bit about the history of fencing. And the second paragraph here, it says, modern fencing has its roots in European styles of sword fighting. So, of course, Europeans have always been fighting wars, and they used swords for a long time because they didn't have guns and cannons and stuff like that.
Bombs.
Exactly. And as war moved from sword-based combat to guns over time, swordplay evolved to become a sport. So, yes, they had rifles, they had guns on the battlefield, and maybe they carried bayonets from time to time, but that's not the same thing as a sword. It's just kind of like a knife at the end of your gun. But they mostly used guns, so fencing or sword fighting became more of a sport. It evolved to become a sport. So to evolve means to change gradually over time. So again, sword fighting was used in war, but it gradually changed into just a sport. It evolved.
Yeah. So this is how we're talking about the history of the sport here. It says here it's difficult to say where exactly fencing was born. However, we do know a couple of things. First of all, the Italians and the French, they're the ones who had the biggest influence in developing the rules and practices that related to the game of fencing or the sport of fencing. So rather than or instead of waging war, fencing shifted to promote fitness and good sportsmanship. I think that's when it left the lower classes and moved up entirely to the nobility who had the time to play sports like this. The rest of the people back then were busy trying to grow food to eat or to make a living. So you'll often see nobility fencing each other. It was kind of cool. So sportsmanship, if you don't know what that means, it just means you're playing by the rules. You're not cheating. You're not trying to hurt your opponent. You're playing fair and square. Being a good sportsman or having good sportsmanship is really important. They'd still talk about sportsmanship today, especially when you're playing other schools or other leagues in some sort of professional sport. Sportsmanship is really important.
Yeah, not trying to cheat, and of course not being a braggart if you win, and not being a sore loser if you lose. It's a game. It's all about the sports and getting better and being gentlemen or ladies when you're playing the game. And these are still crucial to the sport today. So, of course, indeed, they do practice the virtues of good sportsmanship in fencing. And again, it's something that kind of an elite group of people do. It's not really that popular among the masses. But now moving on to the next paragraph, it says, in a fencing match, competitors strive to win points by touching a targeted area of their opponent's body armor with their blade. So they do wear special suits. They're not suits of armor like metal and stuff like that, but it's kind of like a thick cloth. So if you do stab your opponent, the blade won't go through, and it's got a safety tip on it as well. And of course, there's this targeted area which extends from your legs up over your chest. I don't believe it includes your arms or your face either, so you have to hit them basically in the chest area.
Ooh, I would hope you wouldn't go for their face, guys. Now, if you strive for something, this is a verb that we often will use when we're talking about goals, setting goals to achieve through hard work. So if you strive, you're exerting yourself, you're trying very hard to achieve your goals. or you might be in some sort of conflict or battle. So here we've got competitors who are in a contest, and they're trying to strive to win points by touching a targeted area of their opponent's body armor with their blade. I wanted to mention for strive, which is a verb, we don't often use the past perfect or present perfect. We usually just use strive because this verb changes forms and it gets a little weird. Strove is the past tense. I've never said strove, but you'll hear it. Or you could say strived. I've heard strived more than strove. Or striven is the participle, I should say. Striven. We don't use that much either. To be honest, we just use a strive or strived, but strove is correct if you're trying to go for a past tense form of the verb. Now, moving on, we've got 3 blades used in fencing. I'm going to let Tom talk about these.
Yeah, they are the foil, the saber, and the épée. And varying in their construction and rules of play, these 3 weapons also suit different styles and targets. So the swords are a little different, and then the rules are slightly different for each sword, and the target areas are different as well. So I just described the target area for the foil, which is the upper body mostly, but not the arms and not the head. But for the épée, it's for the whole body. And for the saber, it's the upper body, including the arm. So they have different targeting areas, and then these swords are different as well. The blade is different in shape and different in length as well. And again, it says they vary in their construction and they vary in their rules of play. They have different rules and different kinds of swords. Well, the shorter foil and longer épée require thrusting or stabbing with the blade. Meanwhile, the saber is best for cutting and slashing. So again, you try to poke someone with the foil or épée, and then you try to slash, hit somebody sideways with the saber. You could also hit them straight on too, I believe.
Ow. So it says here, meanwhile, the saber is best for cutting and slashing. So you've got the foil, the épée, and also that saber. Cutting and slashing. If you see the word slash, yes, we use it with a knife when we're talking about taking, a slice of somebody's skin off or something like that, slashing. But we'll also use it in advertisements to talk about cutting the price of something. We're slashing prices. Come to our department store today and you'll get a great bargain. So we will use it when we're talking about reducing the prices of something. So moving on to the final paragraph, by no means or not at all in no way is fencing as simple as it seems. It's actually quite difficult to play or to learn and to become proficient. It's highly athletic. If you talk about someone being athletic, they're gifted with good muscles, they have good eye to hand coordination, they're graceful, they're able to perform at high levels in different sports, they're athletic. So you need to be athletic. It requires strategy, using your mind, technique. You'll have to have practiced quite a bit at this, and you need to be quick in your reactions to the moves that your opponent makes.
Indeed. So you got to be watching when they attack. You need to block it off, and you need to figure out when you attack. So indeed, it can be quite exhausting. And yes, indeed, it is a fantastic sport for keeping yourself in great shape, both mentally and physically. So consider joining a fencing club. I think I knew a woman about 4 or 5 years ago, a foreign woman who lived in Taiwan, who was into fencing. She did fencing, although I don't remember if she did fencing here in Taiwan or back in the USA where she was from. But evidently, fencing is still alive and well, and it might be available here in Taiwan. Something you might consider checking out. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
接着请看第2题。前文说明现代击剑 Modern Fencing 起源于欧式风格的 sword fighting 剑术。当战争随着时间从以剑为基础的战斗转变为用枪，剑术则演变成一项运动。接着就是第2题题干本身的句子。It's difficult to say, exactly fencing was born. 我们先用文法观念解题。Say 及物动词后面应该要加名词子句，要有疑问词开头作为引导。 问题是第二题每个选项都可以作为名词子句的开头，所以还是要依赖前后文的语义做判断。后一句是 However.Italian and French masters have particular influence in developing its rules and practices. 然而，意大利和法国的专家在比赛规则与做法的发展上具有特别的影响力。由此可知，前一句应该是在讨论击剑的起源地，所以第二题选 D where， 意思是很难断定击剑究竟在哪里诞生。紧接着，请看第三题。第三题题干的意思是，击剑不再是为了和敌人打仗，空格推广身体健康与良好运动家精神。这些理念至今对于这项运动仍然十分重要。好，现在请同学看4个选项，它们的意思分别是 A. testify 作证， B. shifted 转变， C. suspended 暂停， D. confine 局限。我们从题干可以看到，作战和运动健身提倡运动家精神是不同的目的，所以这是目的转换了。因此第三题 shifted 转变才是我们正确的答案。击剑不再是为了和敌人打仗，而是转而推广运动健身与良好运动家精神。接着请同学看第4题，空格 in their construction and rules of play 这边，中文意思是说，在构造和使用规则空格，这3种武器也适用不同见识和目标。好，请同学看4个选项，这4个选项的意思分别是 A. varying 变化不同， B. benefiting 是获益受惠， C. uniting 是团结联合， D. multiplying 是大幅增加。我们考量前后语义连贯，逗点后的主要子句These 3 weapons 所说的是这3种武器也适用不同见识和目标。由此可知，前一句就该表明，因为在构造和使用规则不同，承接主要子句的这3种武器也适用于不同见识和目标。所以第4题选 A varying。 好，最后第5题，题干的 by no means 意思是一点也不，绝非，这是倒装句。后一句说到击剑是高强度的运动，而且讲究策略技巧和反应速度。由此可知，击剑相当不容易。考量语义，所以第5题选 D as simple as it seems。 中文的意思就是说，击剑绝对不像看起来那么简单。老师刚刚说过了，文章所写的是倒装句。如果没有倒装是什么样的情况呢？没有倒装，那就是 Fencing is by no means as simple as it seems。 好，以上是我们针对这一篇综合测验克漏字所做的解题说明。谢谢大家。
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us, and please join us again next time. And do keep yourselves in shape. Find a sport to participate in, and quit spending all your day on those screens. Get your body moving out there and exercise. It's good for your health. From all of us here at English Digest, my name is Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.